Hey guys, welcome back. Eric Smith here, Five Reasons Sports contributor, also co-host of Scouting the Fins. I've tried to make some graphics that were easier on the eyes for this video, but I keep messing them up and starting over. So I've gotten to the point where you're going to get an Excel spreadsheet and you're just going to have to live with it because the visual aids in this video really aren't the main point anyway. The goal of this video is to take a look at the measurements and numbers from the 50 offensive linemen who participate in the 2025 NFL Scouting Combine and see if we can narrow down that list to some guys who might be on Miami's radar for the draft. I think there's a different mold for draft picks versus free agents. Guys like Aaron Brewer and Isaiah Wynn would not fit the draft profile, but have the tape to show that they're capable of doing it in the NFL. I think there's a different profile for tackles versus guards. Centers, they seem to want someone with more experience. They haven't even drafted a center who developed into a starter. So we're really going to look at this from a overall perspective because if they fit into the profile for a tackle, then they should fit the profile for a guard also, which is what Miami needs most for 2025. The Dolphins have only drafted two offensive linemen in McDaniel's 3 years with Miami. So we're going to include offensive linemen from Kyle Shanahan's time with the 49ers, which started in 2017. The 49ers do draft and develop offensive linemen, but they didn't draft any in Shanahan's first year. They drafted one in each of the next 3 years, and they drafted two each of the last 3 years. Over that 7 year span, they only drafted three offensive linemen on days 1 or 2. And really, that's rounds 1 or 2 because they haven't drafted a player in the third round. We're just going to be looking at numbers here. So we're going to cross guys off the list whose film I like and I would still look at in this system, but the track record isn't there yet to show that McDaniel would consider them. So why is this important? Well, particularly when you look at the guys drafted in the first 2 days, their metrics are nearly all 100% within these criteria that we're going to talk about. Looking at the offensive linemen drafted by Kyle Shanahan or Mike McDaniel teams since 2017, the shortest players are two guards drafted in the fourth and fifth rounds of 21 and 22. The player with the shortest arm length was drafted in the sixth round of 2024. The player with the slowest 40 originally was drafted in the fifth round of 2020, but then was matched by Dominic Pooney last year. But that still falls within the criteria. The player with the lowest bench, short shuttle, and vert was the same player, again, drafted in the fifth round of 2020. And the player with the slowest three cone drill was drafted in the fifth round of 2021. So you can see that most of the highs or the lows with these metrics are with lower round guys, not the more valuable picks. And the one exception to that was Aaron Banks having the shortest broad jump in 2021 as a second round pick. But he matched every other criteria that was set before him. Both Ryan Hayes and Patrick Paul, the only two linemen picked by the Dolphins in the past 3 years, fell into line with every one of these criteria that we're going to discuss. So while I'm sure I don't have this perfect, I think there's something to it, especially when we're talking about day one and day two picks. So as we're looking at the spreadsheet here, the first thing we're going to do is on the right, this far right column, I have the number of drills they did not participate in. So if a player didn't participate in even half of the on-field drills, we're not going to talk about them here. So we're just going to go ahead and mark them down in red. And we'll highlight why they're in red. And then we can continue to move on from there. So first thing we're going to look at is the height. So like I said, fourth and fifth round guards, 76.13 inches. So if we sort this and look at everybody under that threshold, right? We're going to mark them all as red, right? So we lose Jackson Slater, Jared Wilson, and Clay Webb, which are actually all three players that I do like, but they would be shorter than any offensive lineman drafted by the Dolphins. Weight, I'm not too concerned with that because, basically, if a player is heavier but is still moving properly, still within the rest of these measurements, I don't think it's really seen as an issue. Um, and I mean, they've got guys as light as 304. Not sure that we have anybody that's even under 300 here. So I don't think that weight's really going to come into factor either. Arm length. So Jarrett Kingston, 2024, came in at 32.13. So if we look at the players with shorter arm lengths than that, all right, here's where we lose Gray Zabel. We lose Joshua Gray, who is another player that I like. But again, if they were to draft one of those guys, that would be a new low for arm length. Looking at 40 times. So now we're going to be looking for, go largest to smallest here. And so 5.35 from McKivitz in 2020 and Pooney in 2024 are the slowest 40 times. It puts the DNPs at the top. But as we go down here, 5.35, we're really only eliminating two more prospects, but one of those is a pretty key one in Tyler Booker. Looking at the bench press numbers, there was a lot of DNPs for this, and it doesn't seem to consider those a number the way that I entered it, but Colton McKivitz had the lowest number at 20, and the only player below that is Charles Grant, who was already excluded based on the number of drills that he didn't do. Vertical jump, the lowest vertical jump was Colton McKivitz at 26. So only player below that was Brendan Crenshaw Dixon. So we're going to mark him in red. Now we get into the broad jump. We had two players that were below the 100 that Aaron Banks had, but both of those, both Booker and Crenshaw Dixon, had been removed previously. And then our short shuttle, right, looking at times over 5 seconds, we didn't have anybody that fell into that range. Nobody had a slower shuttle than Colton McKivitz. And then the last one we're going to look at here is the 3-cone drill where Jalen Moore had the slowest time of 7.77. And we are going to have some guys below that. So let's update our filters here. And you can see we're losing a few key players here. We're losing Kelvin Banks. We're losing Ariante Ursary based on that 3-cone drill. All right, so now that we've gone through, you can see there's a lot of red on this list. So what do we have left? So if we filter this by color, these are the players that either, some of them had DNPs but participated in enough events to still qualify based on what I'm doing here. But most of them did most of the drills and fall within the measurements. But, this is just the minimum size and athleticism requirements that we talk about for the 49ers and the Dolphins. It's still just not that simple to look at those and say these are the players the Dolphins should be looking at. If we look at the criteria set by the round 1 and 2 picks, which would be McGlinchey, Banks, Cooney, and Paul, that wipes out nearly the entire list from being guys I think the Dolphins would consider in the first 2 days. Obviously, guys like Will Campbell, Josh Connerly, Armand Membu, they won't last beyond that range. The two names remaining that I think do fit into that list are going to be Carson Vincent and Jalen Travis. The issue with them is that neither of them really have day 1 or 2 tape. So, what kind of conclusion can we come to with this? For one, the Dolphins mainly need guards, and they're not viewed as a premium position across the league, and even less so by the Dolphins, Mike McDaniel, and the rest of this Shanahan analysis. I think they'll look in another direction than the draft for the quick fixes. My expectation is that Miami addresses the immediate needs on the offensive line during free agency, and they pick up a couple of day 3 offensive linemen to develop. Maybe it's a Tate Ratledge to play on the inside, or maybe it is a Jalen Travis or Carson Vincent to groom as a future tackle. Let me know what you think of this line of thinking. Am I way off track? Does this make sense? Are there guys on this list that you really like and you'd like to see the Dolphins target? As always, appreciate you guys watching, and we'll talk again more soon.